Hello everyone, Shenn here. Just wanted to take a little bit of time today and talk about Reiki healing, and more specifically Reiki self-healing. Okay, so over the years, what I would do with Reiki self-healing is I would just spend some time, usually before I'd go to bed at night, and I'd be laying there and I would power up with the Reiki. And I would do, various hand positions. And of course I would utilize the symbols and bring the symbols in. Okay. And, with the symbols, I would imagine the symbols as being like golden light, right? The symbol itself. And then that way I could bring the symbol and I could let it sink or move it down into my body wherever it needed to go. However large the symbol needed to be, I'd move it in, and I would just let it, basically, it would pull the Reiki with it to the symbol, and it would be almost like a lozenge or like a tea bag, where it would just kind of start breaking down inside of all the tissues and everything of the body, and it would start doing its healing process, depending on the symbol, what I'm trying to do with it, right? But over the years I started getting to this point where I would do the symbol, and I'd do it in kind of a wheel shape or a circular gate symbol, and I'd do the symbol, and then that symbol would start turning, and I would start moving that inward, kind of like our spiral chokure, right? But instead of just being two-dimensional and flat, I'd think of it more as a cone, right? For it to penetrate with the energy, right? But then what I would do is after doing, if it was a circular symbol in Reiki, or if it was just a symbol like Seihei-ki, I would do it and I would move it into the body, and I'd start turning it, right? And what I found is they became like wheels of light that would kind of penetrate through the bone, through the muscle, through all the tissues, and it would actually invigorate or heal that area even more, because instead of the symbol being static and moving in and dissolving in my body, it would actually be rotating through all the skin and through the muscle and through the tissue and through the organs, right? And so what I found is I would do certain hand placements and build the energy, right, in the body. But then I found it would even work better if I created the symbol and I would create the wheels, and I'd have the wheel one turning one way and one turning the other way, and I kind of worked with moving these wheels around and then moving them through my body, and then I would actually turn the wheel on an axis and bring it forward or bring it back, right? And then that way I could actually use both hands at the same time, and not necessarily in parallel, but kind of offset with these wheels of light or wheels of energy. And I found that was actually a much better, I got a much better result with the Reiki, right? So now when I do the self-healing, I think of it as, instead of more, hand placement and working with symbols on me, I actually get what I call the wheels turning, right? And I get the wheels moving and turning. And so I'll sit there in bed for a little while, and I'll do the symbols, and then I'll create the wheels, and I'll start the wheels turning, and sometimes I'll even have them rotate off of each other and rotate through each other, right, as I move them. And then that way I can make the wheel itself kind of thick, and inside of the wheel I imagine that there are hundreds of the little symbols that I'm using, right? So if I use Seihei-ki and I make a Seihei-ki wheel, then I'm creating these wheels that have Seihei-ki, and it's almost like they almost look like a tire, right? And around the edges of the tire it has all these little Seihei-ki symbols, right? And they're all full of bright light, and they're all lit up. And as I'm turning the wheels, and it's kind of slow because I want the symbols to kind of brush through all of the tissues and organs and bones in my body, you know, and kind of move through. And I want it to be slow enough that it affects all the cells, right, and all the tissues. But then also to kind of create a flow in the energy, right, to where it's flowing down and flowing around through the body, okay, in kind of an like almost like a stream meandering through, you know, and kind of that effect. And I find that when I'll get the wheels moving, then I can move them into each other, and I can turn one vertical and one horizontal, and they almost like a gyroscope. Then it becomes a sphere, right? And so then I'm moving this sphere, and what I'll do is I'll make the sphere a little bit smaller and more intense, and then all those lit up symbols that were in the wheels, they all kind of run into one another, and then it becomes a globe of pure light that is from, like, say, all the Seiheki symbols coming together and becoming one, right, into this globe. And then I can move this globe like through my face and in my head. I might get one globe going, and I'll have one in my upper chest and then one in my lower abdomen, and I'll be moving all this energy around. And so I call it getting the wheels turning, you know, getting the wheels turning, and it starts moving that energy. And then as I get the wheels turning and all of that in place, then I imagine that my body and you know, my whole being is like lifted up, and I imagine that the Reiki flow is like a river of light, and kind of like they talk about in the book of Enoch, right? You know, when Enoch went before the throne of God, there was, you know, the creator, the Ancient of Days, sitting on the throne, and from his thoughts were emanating these rivers of fire coming out, right? And then the rivers of fire were just pure spiritual matter of the highest, right? And it's just flowing out. And so I imagine that is flowing through my whole being. And then that way, you know, the wheels are spinning, and I'm feeling this energy kind of flowing through me. And then I get this this feeling that I'm just this empty vessel, and I'm not hindering this flow at all. I'm just letting it flow through me and purify me, like if I was in a river and letting the river flow through me. And I'm not holding on to any of the Reiki. Because, you know, at first when I was doing self-healing, it was kind of like, oh, I need the energy so bad, and the symbols, and I was like trying to hold on to it and almost like capture it and utilize it, you know, instead of just letting it flow through me. And so in that way, it's like cleansing. And what's interesting is then you get more Reiki flowing through you if you're not trying to hold on to any of it, right? So the more you allow it to flow through, and especially, you know, when you are working on someone, they're on the table, and you're utilizing the symbols, and you're moving the energy around. In a way, you're like one of those firefighters, and you have the hose of Reiki, and you're kind of directing it, but it's Reiki that's really just flowing through, right? And it's almost like the less you direct it and try to decide where it should go, the better, because it will go where it needs to go, right? Because Reiki spirit, the energy itself seems to have an intelligence about it, within it, right? Like a spirit within it. And so then it's not so much we decide, okay, it's got to be this symbol and it has to be here, but it's more just being free-flowing, and maybe like directing music, you know, letting it flow, letting it build in some places and become quiet and slower in other places, right? So anyway, I wanted to talk about that development with just the Reiki self-healing, where I went from just using the symbols, moving the symbols into my body and letting it, you know, dissolve, right? To where I would make the symbols and I'd put them in a wheel, or I would make the symbols and make them more 3D as they move in, and I would start oscillating the symbol or rotating the symbol through me, through the flesh, through the skin, and then I could really feel an effect as it was rotating, right? And so then that turned into, you know, a little bit larger wheels with multiple symbols inside, and then those wheels, when they were flipped and moved around inside of my body, would become like a sphere moving. And then that way, you know, I'm getting everything inside of that sphere is, you know, inside of that area is receiving the Reiki, you know, and then that Reiki is flowing through, and it's invigorating all those cells, and, you know, on a atomic level, molecular level, on a cellular level, on a tissue level. It's just working, and it's clearing, and it's energizing, and it's in a way, I think some of the symbols like Chokure actually go in, and it actually rebuilds DNA. And so like your physical DNA might have disruptions and breaks and things that are wrong with it, and the Reiki goes in and it knows what your spiritual DNA, what the archetype is of your DNA, and it like repairs it spiritually. So when you're doing, you know, Reiki on somebody, and especially using Chokure, and you go into tissues that are damaged, like say a tumor or a sore that won't heal, then you're actually rebuilding the DNA and all the tissues that are coming together to heal that sore, right? And so you're correcting that. So instead of, you know, as we get older, they say that our DNA starts to break down a little bit, and each new cell that is created is not as good as when you were younger, right? Well, I think that Reiki helps correct that, because it knows the archetypal DNA structure that is on a higher dimension, and it fills that in, and then in the lower dimensions it can replace and recreate that, right? So then your cells are actually perfect in a way, you know, for the cells that need to be created for whatever healing that needs to take place. Anyway, that's just a little some insights on Reiki, and that I wanted to share with everybody today. And have a good day. Ami Tofo.